The night she came home with an empty gym bag, I realized I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her witness. And at 7:42 p.m. that same night, my phone buzzed. Unusual sign-in on my work account, using my credentials from my own endpoint. The bag looked heavy, but inside was nothing. No sneakers, no sweat, just silence. And silence isn't surrender, it's surveillance. She kissed me with another man's cologne, smiled like an actress, told me about a killer workout. That was the night her story began to unravel, and mine began to rebuild. My name is Ethan Miller, 33 years old. I write back-end code for an accounting firm most people have never heard of. My life has always been the same predictable loop. Lines of logic on a screen, takeout boxes on the counter, and a hoodie pulled tight over shoulders that never wanted attention. I'm not the loud guy at parties. I'm not the spark in a conversation. I'm the quiet one in the corner, listening, collecting, noticing the details no one else bothers to see. That's my curse, maybe my edge. Silence has always been my language. People think silence means weakness. They think a man who doesn't raise his voice is a man who doesn't fight back. They're wrong. Silence is how you survive. It's how you study the cracks forming in the walls before anyone else admits the house is falling. I never made waves, but I saw everything. And what I saw in Lauren, I couldn't unsee. Lauren and I looked like any other couple on our street. A modest stucco house, sun-faded shutters, a lawn that was always a little too dry. We weren't flashy, never the neighbors people whispered about. We paid our bills on time, remembered birthdays, argued over streaming subscriptions, and kept the grocery list taped to the fridge like it was scripture. For years, I thought that meant we were safe. That routine was the glue. Stability over passion, predictability over chaos. And maybe for a while, it worked. The Friday night takeout, the Sunday laundry folded just so, the quiet evenings with the TV humming low in the background while she scrolled her phone. It was all so normal it could have been invisible, the kind of life no one questions, not even the people living it. But sometimes, the safest-looking houses are the ones already rotting underneath the paint. I just hadn't smelled the smoke yet. The peace in our house was a fragile kind, the kind you only notice when it breaks. On the surface, it was all small rituals. The grocery list stuck to the fridge, rewritten every Saturday morning with the same items: milk, bread, coffee, detergent. The quiet debates over which streaming service we'd cancel this month, always ending with neither of us willing to give up anything. Lauren laughed in the kitchen sometimes, the sound echoing off tile, but it always felt a little too sharp, a little too practiced. We'd sit on the couch together, the glow of the TV painting us as a couple in sync, but my eyes weren't on the screen. They were on the pauses in her breathing, the quick swipes on her phone, the way she turned just slightly away. Domestic life was supposed to mean comfort. For me, it felt like camouflage, routine layered over silence, hiding something I couldn't yet name. They thought my quiet meant weakness. They never understood. Silence is surveillance. And while she rehearsed, I was collecting every hollow smile. I wasn't waiting to confront her. I was waiting for her to unravel. At night, the ceiling fan cut the dark in steady rhythm. Every spin was a reminder. Stillness has a pulse, and I was counting her lies with it. It started small. Lauren began adjusting her schedule, little tweaks that most husbands might not even notice. But I did. She used to come home at 6, toss her keys in the bowl by the door, complain about traffic, and pour herself a glass of wine before dinner. Predictable, ordinary, hours. Then one evening she walked in later, still smiling, still rehearsed. Said she'd tried a new fitness class, claimed she was exhausted. But her hair was perfect, her makeup untouched, her so-called gym bag untouched too, slouched by the door like a stage prop no one dared move. The next night, the same excuse. Another class. Another glow that looked more like theater than sweat. She had rewritten her evenings, replacing shared dinners with workouts, replacing traffic stories with gym talk. To anyone else, it sounded healthy, ambitious, admirable. To me, it sounded like a new language, a script designed to distract me from what she wasn't saying. The gym became her new religion, 6 nights out of 7, she kissed my cheek, tossed out the same breezy line, boot camp again, back by 8, and vanished through the door. And like clockwork, she returned glowing, not with sweat, not with exhaustion, with performance. Arms stretched overhead, fake groans about circuit training, even playful jabs about how I should join her sometime. But the details betrayed her. Her leggings rotated through the same 3 outfits, always spotless. Her shoes never scuffed. The towel in her bag never damp. And her skin? It didn't smell like hard work. It smelled curated, perfume layered carefully, a scent that never belonged in a gym. The staff seemed to know her. She scanned in, waved, played the part of the dedicated regular. And maybe to them, it worked. But to me, the routine was too polished, too rehearsed. Real sweat is messy. Real effort leaves marks. Lauren's routine left nothing but questions. The bag was her weakest alibi. Every night it slouched by the door, perfectly zipped, strap folded like a catalog chute. Inside, nothing. No damp towel, no scuffed shoes, no sweat. Just a crisp flyer from opening week. It wasn't luggage, it was a prop. And every night I replaced it exactly as she left it. Because sometimes the loudest confession is emptiness. I didn't confront her, not once. Every smile, every excuse, every so-called workout, I let it pass. I nodded. I said, "Have fun." I played the part of the oblivious husband because that's what she expected. But inside I was filing it all away. The empty bag, the perfect hair, the perfume that lingered too long. Each detail cataloged like lines of code, clean, organized, impossible to erase. That's what I do best. I build systems. I hold data. I don't forget. She thought my silence meant surrender, that I was blind or too tired to care. What she didn't see was the ledger in my head, filling night after night, each entry another fracture in the story she was selling. And I kept smiling, kept still, because silence is more than patience. It's evidence. When the time came, I wouldn't need to shout. I'd only need to remember. It hit me one night as she brushed past, keys fumbling in her hand. Not sweat, not body spray, something darker, heavier, cologne, and not mine. I froze for half a second, book still open in my lap, eyes stuck on the same sentence I hadn't turned in 20 minutes. She didn't notice. She was too busy rushing through her lines, another rehearsed apology about class starting late. But scents don't lie. They linger, cling, betray in ways words can't. I breathed it in, let it settle, let it carve a notch into that mental ledger I'd been keeping. No questions, no accusations, just silence. Because the truth had a way of slipping out when you stopped chasing it. And now, with every whiff of that cologne, I knew I didn't have to search anymore. I already had the evidence. Her lies started to sound like reruns. Same tone, same timing, same words delivered with just enough brightness to feel real to anyone not listening closely. Boot camp was brutal tonight. You should have seen how crowded it was. I'm going to be sore tomorrow. I could have scripted it for her. Every exit, every entrance, the pattern never broke. She kissed my cheek with that practiced warmth, dropped the empty bag, and filled the house with stories she thought would keep me quiet. But lies wear grooves, like a scratched record spinning the same track over and over. And when you've heard it enough, you don't even need the sound. You can see the shape of the lie before it's spoken. I didn't correct her, didn't challenge her. I just let her talk, nodding like a husband convinced. Because the more she repeated the script, the more obvious it became she wasn't improvising anymore. She was covering tracks already worn thin. One night I didn't stay on the couch. I waited 5 minutes after the door closed, slipped on a hoodie, and followed. No sunglasses, no trench coat, none of that movie detective nonsense. Just distance, just enough to see without being seen. She drove straight to the gym, parked, walked in with her bag slung over her shoulder, posture perfect, confidence sharp. She scanned her key card, smiled at the staff, waved like she belonged. A regular. I stayed across the street, engine idling, headlights off. For 20 minutes I watched the glass doors. People went in, people came out. She stayed inside, a part of the rhythm. Eventually I drove home, more certain than ever. Not because she'd gone to the gym, but because she'd gone too cleanly, too perfectly, like a scene rehearsed down to the second. Real life is messy. This was theater. And I knew the performance wasn't for them. It was for me. After that night, I didn't need to trail her every time. I already knew what I would see, a woman rehearsing a role. Lauren's new routine had the cadence of choreography. Same goodbye, same cheerful tone, same return before 8 o'clock sharp. She rotated the same outfits, left at the same minute, walked in with the same smile. It was all too precise. Life doesn't run like clockwork. Traffic gets messy, gyms run late, people forget things. But Lauren, she never faltered. The rhythm told me more than her words ever could. She wasn't living a life, she was running a script. Every night I watched her move through the house like she was hitting marks on a stage. Keys in the bowl, shoes by the door, bags slouched in the same spot. Even her laughter sounded cued, like an actor waiting for the director's nod. And I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her audience. The tension in our house thickened like humidity before a storm. Every evening she performed her lines, and every evening I let them hang in the air, unchallenged. I could feel the weight pressing against the walls, the way silence pressed against my teeth, begging to break loose. But I didn't. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't question the glow on her skin or the perfect way her hair never shifted. I didn't accuse or demand or corner. That would have been too easy for her. Anger can be dismissed. Confrontation can be dodged. Instead, I sat with it, collected it. Each lie, each empty bag, each too clean alibi folded into a kind of quiet evidence. She thought she was winning. She thought my silence meant she'd fooled me. But silence has its own gravity, and the longer I held it, the heavier it became. And when it finally dropped, she'd never see it coming. The next time she reached for her keys, I didn't even look up from the couch. She leaned down, kissed my cheek, perfume sharp enough to sting. "Boot camp again, back by 8, she said brightly, her script intact. I smiled, faint and practiced, and let 2 words fall out like ice. Have fun. That was it. No questions. No hesitation. Just a dismissal wrapped in politeness. Her smile faltered for half a second, the kind of glitch you catch if you're really watching. Then she recovered, slipped out the door, and the silence closed in behind her. I sat there with the remote still in my hand, the TV flickering nonsense. But I wasn't watching the screen. I was replaying her pause, the way those 2 words had landed heavier than any accusation. She thought she was fooling me. What she didn't know was that I'd already shifted. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her observer. That night, after she left, I sat in the silence and realized watching wasn't enough anymore. Observation gave me patterns, but patterns weren't proof, and proof was what I needed. Not to win an argument, but to steady myself, to know I wasn't crazy. So I decided to dig deeper, not with confrontation, not with shouting matches or ultimatums, with precision, with patience. I started small, checking the gym bag when she wasn't looking, confirming what I already knew, untouched, pristine, empty. I scanned the receipts left on the counter, noted the gaps in her timeline, the way her phone never left her hand but always flipped face down when I walked by. I wasn't trying to catch her in the act, not yet. I was building something quieter, sharper, a map of her lies. And once I finished it, she wouldn't even realize she'd drawn the whole thing herself. The bag became my anchor. Every evening without fail, it sat by the door like a silent witness. She dropped it there with all the casual confidence of someone who believed in her own story. And every evening when she was gone, I checked. Still empty. No damp towel, no sneakers marked with dust from a treadmill, not even the faint chemical tang of deodorant or the salt of sweat. Just a water bottle half filled from weeks ago, the label starting to peel. It was too clean, too deliberate, like a prop left on stage after the curtain call. I put it back exactly as I found it, never disturbing the illusion. And the more I saw it untouched, the more I realized I didn't need to follow her every night. The truth was already in my hands. That bag wasn't just empty, it was evidence, and it told me more than she ever would. From the outside, nothing had changed. We still ate dinner at the same table, the same plates clinking against the same silverware. We still scrolled through streaming menus, arguing half-heartedly about what to watch, settling on something neither of us cared about. She still hummed while folding laundry, moving through the house like everything was intact. It looked like peace. It sounded like routine, but I could feel the fracture beneath it, sharp as glass under carpet. She thought the rituals kept us safe, that as long as the lights were on and the dishwasher hummed, no one would notice the silence swelling between us. But I noticed. Every laugh was an echo, every smile a mask, every kiss at the door a signature on the lie. We were living in a painting of normalcy, colors bright and still. But I'd already seen the cracks in the canvas, and no amount of routine could cover them. Night after night, I watched the same play unfold. Keys jingling, bag by the door, goodbye kiss, the car pulling away into the dark. At first I thought I needed to trace her steps, shadow her routes, confirm the lies mile by mile. But the more I watched, the less it mattered. The routine was airtight, too airtight. It wasn't about the gym anymore, or the hours she claimed to be gone. Those were surface details, easy distractions. The truth lived underneath, in the rhythm of her departures, in the glow she carried home, in the way her laughter sounded like lines read from a script. I stopped caring about the destination, stopped following the car, stopped watching the doors she walked through, because I already knew the answer. It wasn't where she went that kept me awake at night. It was why. When silence stops giving you answers, you have to seek them somewhere else. For me, that meant Hannah, Lauren's younger sister. She'd always been around at family gatherings, birthdays, holidays. Sweet girl, mid-20s, too honest for her own good. Lately, though, she couldn't look me in the eye. That told me enough. I sat on the edge of the bed one night, phone heavy in my hand, the glow of the screen cutting through the dark. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard longer than I care to admit. Finally, I typed, "You free for coffee? Just want to talk." The message sent, blue bubble shrinking into silence. Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed. "Sure, tomorrow night, that quick, no hesitation." No. I set the phone down, staring at the ceiling fan above me, listening to its steady rhythm. Tomorrow, the script would crack, and this time, she wouldn't be able to control it. The next night, I drove to a diner halfway between her apartment and mine. One of those retro spots that time forgets. Red vinyl booths cracked at the seams, chrome trim dulled by years of grease and coffee. A jukebox in the corner hummed out Elvis, the same 3 songs on repeat, tinny and tired. I slid into a booth near the back, away from the neon glare of the front windows. The waitress dropped a chipped mug in front of me, filled it with coffee I had no intention of drinking. I wrapped my hands around it anyway, letting the heat anchor me. Rain tapped against the glass, streaking the view of headlights sliding by outside. The place smelled like fried onions and old sugar, a mix of comfort and decay. I watched the door, every creak of the hinge pulling my eyes up. I wasn't nervous, I was steady, because tonight the silence I'd carried for weeks was finally going to speak. The coffee cooled untouched, steam fading. Elvis crooned heartbreak from the jukebox. I watched the door, knowing sooner or later the truth would walk through it. The bell jingled again. This time, it was her, Hannah. She stepped inside, shoulders hunched slightly, eyes scanning the room before settling on me. The bounce in her step was muted. Her usual bright laugh had thinned, almost fragile, and I noticed how her hands fidgeted with the strap of her bag as she approached. "Ethan," she said softly, voice low enough to almost break under the weight of what she knew. She slid into the booth across from me, and for a moment she hesitated, as if deciding whether she should stay or run. I nodded once, letting her settle. No words, no pressure. The coffee sat between us, forgotten, steam curling lazily in the air. Everything about her tension was a signal I couldn't ignore. The tremor in her fingers, the quick swallow, the dart of her gaze to the floor. She wasn't here to chat, she was here to confess. We started slow. Weather, traffic, the diner's jukebox, anything that wouldn't tip her hand. "New job?" I asked, casually, as if I cared more about the coffee than her answer. "Yeah," she replied, voice soft. "It's okay. Learning a lot." I nodded, listening more than speaking. Every pause, every inflection, every glance she stole toward the window became a piece of the puzzle I'd been building. I let the conversation drift, letting her words fill the space without pressing, giving her room to breathe. Tiny smiles, quiet laughter at nothing, the way she adjusted her sleeve. It all mattered. I could feel her holding back, the tension coiled tight in her chest. Small talk was our camouflage, a way to meet in the middle without revealing the truth too quickly. And in that careful rhythm, I waited, because the moment she let a word slip, it would change everything. After enough small talk to settle the tension, but not enough to feel safe, I leaned forward slightly. The jukebox hummed, rain pressed against the glass. Hannah's hands shook on the napkin. She was about to tell me something that would change not just my marriage, but my entire life. "Hannah," I said, voice low and steady, "I need to ask you something, and I need the truth, not the family version, the real one." Her fingers froze mid-fidget, gripping the napkin on the table. Her eyes met mine, wide, hesitant. I let the silence stretch, giving her space, letting the weight of the question sink in. "It's about Lauren," I continued, calm but unwavering. "Is she seeing someone?" Her lower lip trembled. She swallowed hard, and I could see the conflict warring across her face. My heart didn't race, though. My mind cataloged every micro-expression, every involuntary twitch. Finally, she whispered, almost inaudible, "Okay. Yes." I nodded slowly, letting it land without comment. Silence returned, heavier now, but it wasn't mine alone. The truth had walked into the diner, and it was undeniable. Hannah's words hung between us, fragile, yet undeniable. Lauren had someone else. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just nodded, slow and deliberate, letting the statement sink into the space around us. My fingers rested on the table, tracing the grain of the wood as if anchoring myself to reality. She looked panicked now, eyes darting, searching for a sign of anger or betrayal. "Please, don't tell her I told you," she murmured. She doesn't trust me." I met her gaze steadily. "It stays between us," I said softly. "No lecture, no judgment, just clarity." She exhaled, relief and guilt mixing on her face. The tension eased, but it didn't disappear. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just the revelation that mattered. It was the shift, the silent acknowledgement that the patterns I'd been observing were real, and now confirmed. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I didn't reach across the table. I simply breathed, letting Hannah's confession settle like dust in the diner light. Inside, a storm churned, anger, disappointment, disbelief, but none of it surfaced. Calmness had become my armor, my method of measuring what mattered versus what was noise. The world could tremble around me. I wouldn't. She searched my eyes, looking for a crack, any sign of instability, but I held my composure. Steady jaw, slow blinking, shoulders relaxed. Everything about me said, I am aware, I am watching, but I am not reacting. And in that stillness, I felt the first flicker of clarity. The truth was no longer hidden. It had been spoken, and my silence now carried more weight than any argument, any confrontation could have. I leaned back in the booth, letting her anxiety fill the empty space, while I cataloged every word, every tremor, every hesitation. I let her words hang in the air a moment longer, letting the tension thicken like mist in a cold morning. And then I said it, soft but firm, the kind of statement that cuts through pretense without a shout. Sometimes being good just makes you easier to lie to. Hannah flinched. Not from anger, not from insult, just the weight of truth laid bare. She shifted in her seat, fingers twisting the napkin nervously. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. She already understood. Years of me holding back, of trusting too much, of being patient and silent. It had created a space Lauren could exploit. Being good, I realized, wasn't strength. It was vulnerability. And now that I knew, I wasn't going to squander it. My calm wasn't surrender. My silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation for what had to come next. I stood slowly, letting the chair scrape the floor, a quiet punctuation in the muted diner. Hannah watched me, eyes wide, searching for signs I might react, intervene, or explode. But I gave her nothing. I didn't glance at the jukebox, didn't check the rain-streaked window, didn't even take my coffee with me. I walked to the door, the bell jingling faintly behind me, and stepped out into the damp night air. For the first time, I didn't follow her. I didn't tail her route. I didn't track her every move. I had learned enough. The routine, the rehearsals, the tiny inconsistencies. They were pieces of a puzzle I could now study from a distance. I folded the key facts into the ledger in my mind and let the rest go. It wasn't surrender, it was strategy, and it was only the beginning. After that night at the diner, I didn't follow her anymore. No cars in the driveway, no shadows lingering across the street. I stayed home, sitting on the couch, letting the routine unfold without interference. She left for the gym as usual, keys jingling, smile rehearsed, and I didn't move. I didn't tail. I didn't check the street. I simply watched, noting the rhythm of her steps, the tilt of her head, the calculated brightness in her tone. The silence in the house grew thick, almost tangible, but I welcomed it. Every pause, every carefully timed goodbye, every seemingly casual remark became part of the record I was keeping in my mind. I wasn't angry. I wasn't reactive. I was cataloging, analyzing, waiting. The more she performed, the more details revealed themselves. And in that quiet observation, I felt a strange clarity. Her truth was showing itself, piece by piece. That evening she moved through her routine as if rehearsing a play I had front row seats to. Keys in the bowl, shoes by the door, bright smile, casual chatter about her brutal workout. I didn't respond. Not a word. Not a glance beyond the minimal acknowledgement of her presence. I let her fill the house with sound, stories, and laughter she thought was convincing. No reaction. That was the test. No surprise, no suspicion, just observation. Each step, each line, each practiced glance over her shoulder became data I cataloged. Her routines didn't change under pressure. Her story remained polished, but the gaps grew more apparent with every repetition. And in my silence, she gave herself away more than any confrontation ever could. I realized then that waiting, watching, and doing nothing could be more powerful than acting. Her lies were fragile, and I was steady. It didn't take long for the first fissures to appear. The rehearsed cheer in her voice faltered slightly, a beat too long before the practiced smile returned. Her hands, once steady as she tucked keys into her bag, now trembled faintly. I noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted more often to the door than to the room. Each gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but the pattern was undeniable. She was still performing, but the cracks were forming, tiny and deliberate, like spider webs across a window pane. I said nothing. I didn't prompt, didn't question. I just watched, letting the silence act as its own pressure. The calm that had once allowed her to orchestrate her perfect routine now weighed heavy against her. And in that tension, I understood. The performance could no longer sustain itself. I left the house that night without a word, slipping into the quiet streets until I reached a small bar tucked between a barber shop and a shuttered music store. Mark's place. Low lights, cracked stools, a jukebox that never played anything newer than '89. Mark slid a whiskey across. "You look like a man choosing between burning it down and walking away." "Neither," I said. "I'm cataloging." We traded old stories for a while, the harmless kind that scrape rust off memory. Then my phone buzzed. A work alert. Unusual sign-in on my account. Time-stamped 7:42 p.m. I was in the bar at 7:42, phone in my hand, company laptop at home. Mark saw my face change. "Problem?" "Could be nothing," I said. "Or it's the part that makes everything make sense." I paid, stepped into the alley behind the bar, and opened the admin console. A pull request pushed from my machine, not code I wrote. A file name jumped out. Trial balances Q3 clients.zip. Not ours to touch without clearance. Someone had used my login on my hardware inside my house. I called IT. "Flag it and freeze my access," I said. "Assume credential compromise." "By who?" "Start with Cole Barrett," I answered. "Senior dev. Desk 3 rows over. The man who always laughed too loud at jokes no one told. The man I'd seen once, weeks back, wearing the same cologne Lauren carried home." I didn't go home. I drove to the gym instead, the one that had become our church of polite lies. The parking lot was a mirror of wet asphalt and tired neon. I waited with the engine off until I saw him. Cole, hoodie up, swagger casual, the kind of casual you practice. He wasn't coming from a workout. He was walking her to her car. I stepped out. No theatrics, no shouting, just distance closed with purpose. He saw me first, froze. Lauren's smile collapsed like a set piece. "Ethan," Cole said, half grin cracking. "Didn't know you came here." "I don't," I said, "but my credentials do." I held up the work alert on my screen. The timestamp glowed like a siren. Lauren reached for a line, any line. "This isn't—" "It is," I cut in, quiet and precise. "My session, my login. The VPN logs show your device fingerprinting through my endpoint at 7:42, client data you shouldn't have touched, and a cologne I don't wear." Cole's chin lifted, defiant for a beat, then faltered. "She said you never look up," he muttered. "Said your background." I almost smiled. Background sees everything. Security lights flickered. Somewhere inside, treadmills hummed like insects. Lauren's voice turned brittle. "You can't prove any of this." "I don't have to. It can," I said. "Access logs, IP, device ID, the part that doesn't sweat." Cole tried to speak but settled for silence. There's a kind of quiet that isn't mercy. It's inventory. I took it all in, his shoes still clean, her gym bag still light, the stink of a lie dressed as routine. I left them where they stood and drove home. The house greeted me with that practiced peace, but it felt different now, less like camouflage, more like a crime scene already photographed. I powered down my laptop, sealed it in a bag, and set it by the door. Evidence. Morning cut cleanly through the blinds. I didn't pack a suitcase. I packed documents, bank statements, the car title, the mortgage file. Not souvenirs, stakes. The law office smelled like polished wood and coffee that had boiled too long. Richard Hayes listened while I told him only what mattered. "There's an affair," I said, "and there's potential misuse of client data through my account. I want out, quietly, cleanly, safely." "Do you want to pursue the data angle?" he asked. "Only to protect myself," I said. "No spectacle." He slid the forms across. I signed my name with a hand that didn't shake. "You seem remarkably composed," he said. "I already broke," I answered. "This is just the rebuild." "So," he asked, pen poised, "you're filing?" "I am." And just like that, the quiet observation of months began to turn into action. The office smelled of paper, polished wood, and faint coffee, orderly, controlled, unyielding. Richard Hayes sat across from me, hands steepled, eyes calm but attentive. I laid out the story slowly, deliberately, not in bursts of anger or emotion, not with embellishment, just the facts, the gym, the rehearsed routines, the perfume, the empty bag, the small inconsistencies that had piled up into a mountain of evidence. I spoke in pieces, letting each detail settle, each pause heavy with implication. Richard listened, jotting notes, occasionally raising an eyebrow, but saying nothing until I finished. "There's no concrete proof," he said finally, voice neutral. "Nothing digital? No texts? No photos? No call logs?" "No," I replied evenly. "I just want out. Quietly, cleanly." He nodded slowly. The papers on his desk reflected the fluorescent light above, sterile and precise, much like the decision I had made. I wasn't angry. I was resolved. Richard slid the initial forms across the polished desk. I picked up the pen, my hand steady. Every line, every box, every fold felt heavier than the last, but not with regret, with clarity. I didn't hesitate. I traced my name across the paper. Ethan Miller, done, finished. A slow, deliberate signature that sounded louder in my mind than any shout could have. Richard studied me, eyes calm but probing. "You're remarkably composed," he said. I shrugged, almost imperceptibly. "I already broke. This is just the rebuild." The pen clicked against the desk as I set it down, finality echoing like a metronome through the room. No dramatics, no last-minute protests, just the quiet, irreversible act of reclaiming my own life. I stood, shook his hand, and left the office. The sun outside felt different, sharper, warmer, brighter. I wasn't free yet, but I had direction, and for the first time in months, that was enough. As I stepped out into the late afternoon sun, the city felt different, sharper, louder, more alive. I walked a few blocks slowly, letting the warmth hit my face, the sounds of footsteps, car engines, and distant laughter grounding me. I replayed Richard Hayes' words and my own, calm and measured. I already broke. This is just the rebuild. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't triumph. It was a statement of fact. Months of silent observation, of cataloging lies, of enduring the weight of false calm had broken me down. And signing the papers wasn't an end. It was the first step of constructing something new, something steady. I didn't feel light. I didn't feel liberated. I felt aligned, clear, focused. The rebuild wouldn't be easy. But I had the plan, the resolve, and the knowledge that whatever Lauren did, I wouldn't be caught unaware again. I walked in quietly, keys in hand, the familiar hum of the house greeting me. Lauren was folding laundry, humming softly, but her movements were sharper, more deliberate, as if she was measuring each action against my presence. Her head snapped up when she saw me. For a fraction of a second, her carefully constructed composure faltered. Eyes widened, shoulders stiffened, and her hands trembled just enough to catch my attention. "Where were you?" she asked, voice tight, controlled, trying to mask the panic creeping beneath the surface. I didn't answer. I simply placed my coat on the hook, moving with calm deliberation. The silence stretched, heavy, and I watched as the cracks in her routine began to show. The rehearsed brightness faded slightly. Her gestures, once so practiced, now betrayed tension. Finally, I realized she had begun to understand. The game had shifted, and I was no longer playing. That night, she tried a different approach. Leaning closer on the couch, brushing her hand against mine, her perfume heavy with memory, she whispered about old nights, first dates, anniversaries, the way I used to look at her. Her laughter softened, voice warm, inviting, attempting to fold me back into the comfort of familiarity. She tried to seduce, to spark desire, to remind me of the life we once shared. But I didn't respond. Not with touch, not with a word. I watched her, cataloging every gesture, every tremor, every attempt at connection. Nostalgia was a weapon she wielded carefully, and I recognized it immediately. The more she leaned, the more the tension in her posture betrayed panic. Her performance was unraveling under the weight of truth I had carried silently. I didn't need to act. Her attempts to manipulate the past were no longer enough to reach me. She leaned closer, whispering about old memories, brushing her hand along my arm, trying to stir what once existed between us. The room pulsed with nostalgia, the scent of her perfume heavy in the air. I looked at her calmly, steadily, without a flicker of reaction. "You don't attract me anymore," I said plainly. The words landed like a cold gust of wind. She froze mid-motion, eyes wide, searching for a crack in my composure. There wasn't one. What do you mean?" she whispered, voice trembling. "I mean exactly what I said," I replied slowly. "Physically, emotionally. You've hollowed it all out. There's nothing left for me to reach." Her lips parted, a gasp of disbelief, but no protest followed. My silence was sharper than any argument could have been. In that moment, the power she thought she held slipped entirely from her hands. Her eyes flared with disbelief, then quickly ignited into anger. She stepped closer, voice rising, trembling with frustration. "How dare you?" she hissed. "After everything, after all we've been through." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. My calm was deliberate, a contrast to the storm she unleashed. "You lost me a long time ago," I said evenly. "This is just the moment you noticed." Her hand shot out, shoving me lightly in the chest, a futile attempt to rattle me. I remained unmoved, steady as stone. She tried words, accusations, reminders of old promises, but I let them pass, cataloging each one without reaction. The power had shifted. No tantrum, no pleading, no seduction could reach me now. Her fury was a reflection of her own loss of control, not of my feelings. Silence, as always, did more than any confrontation ever could. Lauren's chest heaved, every breath shallow and fast. She circled the room, hands clenching and unclenching, her eyes searching mine for any crack in my composure. I didn't give her one. I sat on the edge of the bed, calm, deliberate, letting the silence grow heavy between us. Her gestures, once commanding, now seemed frantic. Every attempt to provoke, to seduce, to manipulate fell flat. "You don't understand," she finally spat, voice sharp, trembling. I only shook my head slightly, calm, steady, observing. Nothing more. She realized then that the control she had relied on for months no longer existed. My detachment wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. The more she panicked, the more the truth asserted itself. I wasn't reacting because I didn't need to. The silence I maintained had weight, and it spoke louder than any argument ever could. She had lost her audience. I had regained myself. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, face set, lips pressed in a thin line. She dropped a stack of papers onto the table with a sharp slap. My eyes followed the movement, catching the title page. Petition for divorce. Her name, her signature. "I'm done playing games," she said, voice tight, controlled, as if daring me to react. I studied her for a moment, taking in the shake in her jaw, the twitch in her left eye, the way her posture screamed tension disguised as strength. "You think you're the only one who can end things?" she challenged. I looked down at the papers, then back at her, calm and measured. "Fine. You want cold? I can be cold." It wasn't shock I felt. It wasn't fear. It was a quiet acknowledgement. She had finally made a move. But the power she thought she held, that had already slipped. I let my eyes linger on hers for a moment, taking in the flicker of surprise that passed too quickly for her to mask. Then, slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag and pulled out a second stack of papers. My own. Signed, stamped, ready. I placed them beside hers on the table with calm precision. "I've been ready," I said softly, measured, letting the weight of the words settle between us. She froze, mouth slightly open, a mixture of disbelief and rising panic in her eyes. The performance she had perfected over weeks, every smile, every rehearsed story, every carefully timed exit, cracked under the pressure of reality. For the first time, the tables had turned completely. The script was no longer hers to control. I wasn't angry, I wasn't vindictive, I was simply steady, deliberate, and finished with the pretense. She was left to gather the pieces alone. Her hands shot out, grabbing both stacks of papers and sweeping them to the floor. Pages fluttered like dying birds, edges curling, signatures smeared by trembling fingers. "This was never real to you, was it?" she screamed, voice sharp, breaking against the quiet of the room. "You're enjoying this, watching me fall apart." I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I crouched, picking up one page she had missed, my signature still crisp at the bottom. "You keep thinking everything is a performance," I said softly, each word deliberate, every move a bluff. But not this time. She sank to her knees, gathering torn papers, sobbing into her hands. Her chest heaved, shaking, desperate to reclaim the control she had lost. I remained standing, steady, calm, a silent observer to the collapse of a life built on rehearsal rather than truth. The storm raged, but I didn't move. Her sobs subsided into whispered pleas. "I don't want to lose you," she murmured, voice fragile, breaking through the heavy air. I looked down at her, calm, steady, unmoved. No anger, no sorrow, no flicker of past attachment, only clarity. "You already did," I said simply, my tone even, unshaken. "You just didn't feel it until now." Her hands froze mid-motion, the torn papers scattered around her forming a chaotic pattern of desperation. She searched my eyes for any sign of concession, any spark of old attachment, but found none. I didn't step closer. I didn't speak again. I let her realize fully that the control she thought she had, the power of her pleas, was gone. Her grip on the narrative had crumbled. My calm wasn't cruelty, it was finality. She had to understand, the life we shared was no longer mine to return to, and I wouldn't. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and faint paper, sterile and unforgiving. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare, making every face sharper, every expression more revealing. Lauren sat 2 rows ahead, her lawyer at her side, composed but distant. I took my seat, chest steady, hands resting lightly on the bench. The silence felt heavier than any argument I had endured at home. Hannah stepped up to the witness stand, fingers trembling slightly as she gripped the edge. Her eyes met mine briefly, and I gave the smallest nod, enough to signal that I was ready, steady, and that her voice mattered. "I wasn't trying to ruin anything," she said quietly. "I didn't want to be in the middle, but Lauren, she told me things I shouldn't have known." The lawyer asked for clarification. Hannah glanced at her sister. "Yes," she said softly. "She was seeing someone else." The room grew still. The truth had entered the official record. The proceedings moved faster than I expected. No heated arguments, no disputes over assets, no battles over furniture, no fight for trivial claims. Lauren sat composed, gray suit muted against the sterile tones of the courtroom, her gaze fixed ahead. I kept mine steady, observing, noting, cataloging every small reaction, every micro-expression. Hannah's testimony had left little room for ambiguity. The affair confirmed, the lies documented, the narrative set. Signatures were collected, stamps pressed into paper, and formal acknowledgement of an ending that had burned slowly for months was complete. When it was over, I stepped out into the late afternoon sun. The city felt brighter, more alive, but I didn't feel triumphant or bitter. I didn't shout. I didn't celebrate. I just walked, aware of the stillness around me. The divorce was official. The house of lies dissolved, and I felt clean, quietly, deliberately, finally free. The courtroom's fluorescent lights still lingered in my eyes as I stepped out, the stark brightness clinging to my vision like a reminder. The chairs, neutral tones, and stiff backs had pressed fatigue into my muscles, leaving a weight I hadn't realized I carried. At the old bookstore cafe, I sat on the crooked stool by the window, cinnamon and paper in the air. Outside, life moved on. For the first time in months, so did I. I wasn't triumphant. I was clean. Sitting on that crooked stool, the aroma of paper and cinnamon filling the air, I let myself breathe for the first time in months. No one outside knew the storm that had passed, the meticulous observation, the quiet endurance. And that was fine. It never needed an audience. The city moved on, streets filled with ordinary people, their mundane lives pressing forward, unbothered by the weight I had carried. I watched them, feeling the freedom to exist outside of pretense, outside of expectation, outside of a life built on lies. The coffee in my hands, the soft hum of conversation, the light filtering through the window, they weren't just comfort. They were markers of clarity, of control, of a life I could finally reclaim for myself. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't broken. I was whole. I leaned back in the crooked bookstore stool, hands wrapped around the warm mug of coffee, letting the hum of life outside wash over me. Months of observation, of silent endurance, of cataloging lies, all of it had led to this quiet moment. The victory wasn't in revenge. It wasn't in confrontation or dramatic spectacle. It was in taking back control, in refusing to participate in someone else's performance, in finally letting go of the illusion, the routine, the rehearsed smiles. Because when you stop performing, the story changes, the power shifts. The weight of expectation, manipulation, and deceit falls away. I didn't need to shout, to punish, or to justify. I simply existed, free of the scripts that once dictated my life. If you lived through betrayal, would you rebuild or take a clean break? Comment your choice. The silence isn't empty, it's liberation.